Thanks, and not a great deal of mansplaining on this programme about the football. The headlines, as ever, the Observer has gone with that huge anti-Brexit march, and from a different perspective, Camilla's got a story here, no deal, no cash. That's another group of people writing to the papers saying that Theresa May must hang really tough and ensure that the Brussels side understands that if they don't give us a deal, they'll get not a penny of our money. There's the Sun with a story I don't understand. There's the Sunday Times with a story I do understand, I think. It's a very, very serious story. This is one of the big stories of the day, which is there are pumps which are used to put opiates, that's drugs, into people at a certain rate, and some of them seem to be failing, and it is possible that people have been killed up and down the country by these pumps. This is as a result of the Gosport investigation. A whistleblower has come to the Sunday Times. We'll be talking about that story, I'm sure, later on. The Sunday Telegraph has a story about housing and the lack of housing, and inside the effect of not enough homeowners on Conservative constituencies electorally at the next election. And then finally, an extraordinary story here, really. The Mail on Sunday. Give me £20 billion or I'll bring you down, says Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, to Theresa May. And if you think that's going at something, you should read the language inside. It's an act of extraordinary and rare cabinet insubordination, if it's true. So let's start with Gaby. Is it true, do you think, Gaby?
I think it is either gospel truth or it is a version of the truth that the Defence Secretary would like out there. Because the story is about a meeting between Defence Secretary and Chiefs of Staff or senior military officers in which he promises them, I'll get you the kind of money that Jeremy Hunt got for health. And they say, well, are you sure you've got the PM on side? And he says, I made her, I can break her.
I made her, I can break her.
Sounds like a line from a film. Because, of course, he was ran her leadership campaign. Now, that's you would normally expect to be invited in for sort of an interview without coffee after this sort of story was briefed, if not summarily sacked, if this was sort of normal times. But as we all know, they're not normal times. Theresa May can't afford to do that.
Do we think that cabinet discipline is now breaking down quite badly? Because you've got Boris Johnson saying F business when it comes to Brexit, which again is an extraordinary thing to be saying. We've got this very, very aggressive leaking by somebody to the Mail on Sunday.
I think it broke down some time ago. I think there's a strong feeling that Theresa May isn't going to be around for much longer once the Brexit deal is done or not done, whatever happens. And therefore people are sort of parking their tanks, quite literally in this case, on her lawn. But I think there's a second thing here, which is that Gavin Williamson made his pitch for credibility to the department, which it's fair to say has some degree of scepticism about him as Defence Secretary on the grounds that, I'll get you more money. Now the Chancellor's saying, well, all the money's gone to the NHS, there is no more money. I think he's in an awkward position, and this kind of tough talking is slightly covering for that. You notice Liz Truss in the Sunday Telegraph as well today saying it's not macho to ask for more money. The really tough thing is to manage with the money you've got. Who could she possibly be talking
No
about?
idea who she's talking. I don't know how much a World Cup ticket would cost. I would pay the equivalent amount of money to be sitting as a fly in the wall the next time that Theresa May and Gavin Williamson sit down together.
Can you imagine?
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Indeed. Camilla, let's turn to the Sunday Times story. We have to explain this a bit, don't we?
Yes. So the Gosport report obviously came out listing categoric and awful failures with regard to a number of people dying. The Sunday Times has now spoken to a whistleblower who is suggesting that there is a problem with the syringes that were used at that hospital and could have been used at others up until, I believe, 2015. Now, there are two types of syringes that disperse into the body opiates like diamorphine. And
to be absolutely clear, this is so that nurses and doctors don't have to come in hour after hour giving little injections. They pump the stuff into the body.
Time-saving, and so anyone who's had a relative or been in hospital is familiar with having a cannula in and having it fixed to a syringe that slowly pumps out the correct amount of drugs. Now, concerns were raised internally some years ago that two syringes, one which pumped drugs very slowly and one which pumped a great amount of drugs very quickly, were easily confused. So much so that some hospitals took their own action and put fluorescent stickers on different syringes to make sure there was no confusion. Now, we all know how busy and sometimes understaffed emergency wards are. Staff could have been overtired, confused, under pressure and mixed up syringes. Now, the report itself dismissed any concerns about the syringes, saying this isn't something that's on our radar, this isn't something that we think is significant. However, Jane Barton, the doctor at the centre of this whole scandal, was asked repeatedly in her police investigation about the syringes and her use of them.
No comment.
But it means that it was on the police's radar at the time, and the whistleblower suggesting the reason why the syringes didn't form a major part of that Gosport investigation is because it could obviously open the floodgates to a massive NHS cover-up.
And if people are thinking this sounds a little bit obscure, a little bit detailed, we should refer to the Sunday Times front page headline, which says that this might have killed thousands of people up and down the country. There are 40,000 of these syringes being used now inside the NHS. And if it's true, then this is the biggest NHS cover-up ever, possibly.
What's interesting in the coverage as well is the suggestion that countries like New Zealand and Australia banned use of the syringes in the noughties. The NHS said, we really need to phase these out, and invited hospitals to stop using them, I think, in 2010 for a period of 5 years. But there wasn't an official recall. So, yes, there is a suggestion they're still in operation, and actually the NHS uses these syringes more than any other health service in the world.
It's a really big story I'll talk to Jeremy Hunt about, obviously, later on. Now, I said at the beginning of the show that this was a divided country, but after Trump, America is a divided country too. You've got a story from the tablet there, Gaby.
Yes, this is a tweet from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, who tweeted last night. Last night I was told by the owner of Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia, which is a restaurant for those of you who don't live in Lexington, to leave because I work for the president, and I politely left. Her actions say far more about her than about me. So what you've got here really is apparently the backstory is that the owner of the restaurant, when Sarah Sanders came in, said to her staff, do you want to serve this person? A lot of her staff are immigrants, obviously very angry about the scenes that we've seen on the border with Mexico, the policy of separating children from their families. And the staff basically said, no, we don't. You know, we'd like to make a personal stand here. And it's that moment, I think, that happens when things become personal and your private life as well as your public life becomes full of people criticising you. That sense that, you know, public sentiment is turning against you in very meaningful ways.
Camilla, can I turn to another aspect of the health stories that are out there today?
Sure.
Very important story, which is this childhood obesity campaign. It's no one, you know, denies that this is a really, really big issue. The question is, how do you deal with it?
Well, this was the main government drop into the Sunday papers. Everybody's run it, and everyone's run it in different ways. The top lines of the story are essentially that the government is considering a number of measures to halve childhood obesity by 2030. They include banning the sale of energy drinks to children, stopping 2-for-1 bog-off deals on junk food, stopping TV advertisers from loading lots of junk food adverts into primetime TV. At the moment, children can't be advertised to during their own viewing in the morning, but actually the 8 and 9 o'clock shows are still full of adverts for pizzas and sweets and chocolates.
And there's a suggestion of putting calorie counting on all restaurant menus. I wonder if that is kind of burger vans and pie vans.
It's apparently all cafes and restaurants and takeaways, so that's also significant in order to give parents more choice. And the other thing that I think will be music to mothers and fathers' ears at the checkout, this taking away of sweets and chocolates that we always encounter as soon as we go to pay. So all of these measures are under consideration. Personally speaking, I think this is good news because there is this sense that as well, there needs to be an onus on companies, on retailers, to not load so much secret sugar into goods that sometimes we associate with being healthy. For instance, children are fed lots of yogurt.
We always have over public health measures, which is it government's role to intervene or is it for parents to do more to police their children's diet? But I think this is recognising that not all parents, that's lovely if parents do, not all parents do. And, you know, their kids are the ones who are at risk.
The Daily Mile initiative that's been suggested, which is to get school children to do a mile a day, either by walking or cycling to school, but equally getting exercise. Funnily enough, my children's school, their state school in Hertfordshire, they do the Daily Mile and it's had huge results on health and fitness. There's a school in Scotland, apparently, that's absolutely transformed the health of the children there. And it's very simple. They just do a mile around the playground with Fitbits.
Very good. OK, let's turn to the big march yesterday.
Indeed.
Most of the papers say 100,000 people at least. That seems to be agreed by everybody.